They called Tijuana the Gateway, a city that breathed in the United States and exhaled its shadows. By day, it hummed with commerce, border crossings, cafe terraces, and factories whose lights burned into the night. By night, a different current ran through its veins, men with names that sounded like weather warnings, convoys gliding across Avenida Revolution like storm fronts, and a quiet business of fear paid for in cash, or blood. You could see them if you knew where to look, a glance at the curbside, a car idling too long, faces hidden in shadow. The thing about a city on the edge is how fast everything can tilt. One morning, parents send their children off to school with the usual instructions: finish your homework, don't stay out late, and by evening those same parents are learning how to pull a shutter blind so tight, even the stars outside seem to step back. This is not a story of one villain and one victory. It's the geometry of violence, lines of power, broken pacts, a police force with one uniform but two loyalties, and a cartel logic that rewarded cruelty as insurance. Imagine a night in 2008, a narrow street, laundry strung between balconies, a taco stand steaming in the lamplight. Somewhere a single gunshot cracks, then another. Two men run. Tires squeal. A message, as gruesome as it is cowardly, nailed to a wall. The next morning, children file past the scene. Their phones already hold pictures they'll never delete. When soldiers finally came, the streets changed, convoys of armored vehicles, boots on pavement, the hum of a city under military watch. By then, the map of power had shifted. Old bosses were dead or jailed. New names rose. Alliances formed, and shattered. And through it all, the cost mounted. 8,500 dead in Tijuana. A number so raw it can snap conversation in half. For those who lived inside the siege, tragedy wasn't counted in headlines. It was the mortuary worker who learned to measure grief in bodies. It was the mother who learned to read the skyline like a language of threat. And so tonight, we go back, to the city before the storm, to the lives that made Tijuana more than a border crossing, into the first small betrayals that became the fuse for everything that followed. You're watching a true crime cartel original. If you love deep, real stories, the kind that dig beneath the headlines, tap that like button, hit subscribe, and drop a comment below with the city you're watching from. It helps more than you know, and keeps stories like this alive. Now, let's get into it. Before the storm, there was a city brimming with possibility. Tijuana, the flashpoint at the edge of two worlds. By day, its border crossings hummed with commerce, truckloads of produce, electronics, and everyday dreams. By night, Avenida Revolution became a glowing artery of bars, taco stands, and clubs, drawing visitors from both sides of the frontier. Visitors came for the culture, for the promise of a city that seemed alive 24 hours a day. But that proximity to the United States, it was more than geography. It was opportunity, and danger. A prime corridor for goods, people, and inevitably, contraband. Trade here didn't just mean imports and exports. It meant anything that could be moved, above ground or below. And behind the city's festive face, another system pulsed. In the late 80s and into the 90s, the Ariano Felix family inherited an empire after their mentor, Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, the Padrino, was arrested. The brothers and sisters turned Tijuana into their stronghold, building a criminal enterprise that touched every corner of the city. By the early 2000s, their grip was everywhere, from the dusty outskirts to the glittering clubs downtown. Tourists danced on floors built over smuggling tunnels. Families ate in restaurants quietly owned by cartel fronts. Marta set up her taco stand before sunrise. She says, "I'd see their convoys before I heard them, black SUVs, windows tinted so dark you couldn't tell if anyone was inside. They drove past my cart like they owned the street." Officer Rivera wore the uniform, but his loyalty had a price. "Every night," he said, "I was told to look the other way. And I did. I signed away my conscience 1 peso at a time." The Ariano Felix organization thrived on that silence, on the quiet deals made in back rooms and on street corners. But not all deals were stable. Rivals watched. Allies whispered. In 2002, the arrests of Ramon Ariano, Felix and Benjamin weakened the family's chokehold. Power struggles simmered beneath the surface. Sinaloa's emissaries probed the city's defenses. New lieutenants questioned old orders. The city kept moving. Tourists kept coming. And yet, there was an unease in the air. A strange stillness after dark in certain neighborhoods. Fewer children playing in the plazas. More doors locked before sunset. Federal authorities began probing deeper: raids, asset seizures, sudden disappearances. They were testing the walls of the empire, looking for cracks. The cracks were there. And in the world of cartels, a crack is not a flaw, it's an invitation. By 2007, whispers of an internal fracture grew louder. Factions loyal to El Ingeniero clashed with those siding with Eduardo Teodoro Garcia Cimental, El Teo. It was a split the city wasn't ready for, but it was coming. And when allegiances turn, the same streets that echo with music can just as easily echo with gunfire. This was Tijuana in the calm, before the first bullet of the siege was fired. Before armored convoys became a nightly sight. Before betrayal tipped the scales and the city's heartbeat became the sound of gunfire. The city was still standing. But the storm was already on its way. This was the shift. Night fell in Tijuana, and with it, the city's fragile surface of normalcy cracked wide open. Cartel gunmen, masked and armed like statues of menace, perched atop armored trucks, silent harbingers of the storm to come. Federal forces rolled in. National Guard convoys cut through tense neighborhoods, their presence both a shield and a signal. War was not only declared, it had arrived. Paramedics answered frantic calls. They found a body slumped in an alley, coppery blood still warm. Shell casings littered the asphalt. The city they thought they knew had just transformed into a killing ground. And in the aftermath, carcasses of cars burned and riddled with bullets, silent witnesses to carnage. Streets abandoned. A city on pause. But this was only the beginning. Just weeks before, whispers of a power shift began. Inside the fortified walls of a cartel compound, leaders from the Tijuana cartel, descended from the infamous Ariano Felix family, met in shadows. Fernando Sanchez Ariano, known as El Ingeniero, had wrested control from his rival El Teo. Tensions ran deeper than territory, blood debts and betrayal cut through the ranks like knives. Then came the seizure, a massive cocaine shipment intercepted, not by the army, but by a rival faction with Sinaloa's fingerprints all over it. The loss was too big to ignore. Retaliation became inevitable. He was only 19. Barely holding a rifle bigger than his arm. Caught in the gravitational pull of cartel families, he'd been handpicked for his first mission. The order was simple: show them who we are. In a downtown newsroom, a seasoned reporter scanned police reports. There had been hints, decapitations, public executions, but before he could publish, the call came. Leave it alone. Not just your life, your family. 3 separate lives, a cartel boss plotting retaliation, a rookie gunman desperate to prove himself, and a journalist standing on the edge of a story too dangerous to print. All were heading toward the same collision point. At dawn, it happened. Tijuana realized, the siege had begun. Silence. Then, gunfire. The city would never be the same. And this was only the first strike. What came next would turn Tijuana into a battlefield where no one was safe, not even those who thought they were untouchable. So now, a once vibrant city becomes a dark symphony of violence. Welcome to Act 3, the city under siege. Streetlights flicker against the spray of sirens. Here, paramedics strain over bodies riddled with bullets, shoulders drenched in sweat and blood. Cartel gunmen have turned public spaces into war zones. Gunfire is constant, day blends into night. No one sleeps. People whisper, we're living through a civil war. A police cruiser, tires still warm, blocks off another street. A fresh murder scene, empty shells on asphalt, a still warm body, channels of red running into the gutter. Cartel factions do not just shoot, they dominate, claim territory. Federal police and military patrols weave through this chaos, but often, they become part of it. Some patrols are hit squads in disguise. Gunfire echoes in alleyways. Helicopter blades cut through night skies. A single mother peeks outside her window only to witness masked men dragging screams into the darkness, another kidnapping, another disappearance. Curfews crumble. The violence no longer stops for nightfall, it only intensifies. Watch through a cracked window, children pulled from school at midday. Storefronts boarded up overnight. The hum of normal life is gone, replaced by dread. One survivor recalls, "We heard the gunfire so close, we could smell the gunpowder." Tijuana's morgue, workers move through corridors thick with death's stench. Bodies stack on the floor, the cold hum of freezers barely helps. Masks filter the odor, but inside, people choke on grief. Parents clutch their children closer. A grandmother silently weeps as she sees the street where her son once played now littered with bullet casings. Businesses are ghosted shells, windows smashed, locks cut, lights extinguished. One day, Tijuana falls silent, but not with peace. It's a silence born of terror. And then, a massacre. Brutal. Unforgiving. Entire families wiped out. The body count surges past 5,000. Messages delivered in death, mutilated bodies placed in public spots. Heads cut off. Tongues removed, warnings to those who speak out. A visible manifesto of fear. In one horrific act, 12 bodies, stripped, mutilated, dumped in front of an elementary school. A landscape forever altered, innocence weaponized. The city is now a memory, its streets hold echoes of pain. But survival demands answers. As the city bleeds, alliances shift in the shadows. What happens when fractured forces clash? What does justice look like in a place where institutions bleed corruption? Tijuana's battlefield was never still. But now, the ground itself was moving. Rivals shook hands in shadowed corners, alliances were born in whispers, and died in gunfire. The Tijuana cartel, once a monolith, was fractured. But desperation makes strange bedfellows. Former enemies now sat together, plotting to push the Sinaloa cartel back across the line. Trust? It was currency, and every peso of it was counterfeit. Then, the crack in the wall. Payroll records leaked from City Hall. Signatures in neat ink, but the names? Police chiefs. Judges. Elected officials. All tied to cartel stipends. The scandal erupted like a bomb. Across the border, Washington's patience wore thin. Joint operations began. U.S. drones painted targets, Mexican Marines kicked in the doors. The targets adapted. A single name now consumed both governments, a ghost in human form, slipping from club to hillside villa, from funeral to safe house, never twice in the same week. Each rumor sent soldiers scrambling. Each silence meant he was planning. Authorities bragged about arrests. But each victory was hollow, a pawn for a king still free. Then, the retaliation. The night ended with smoke, sirens, and the smell of burnt metal. The message was clear, every arrest would cost the city in blood. And through it all, the ghost kept moving. Peace was an illusion. And in Tijuana, illusions could get you killed. And so the city braced, because what came next would be the last siege it could survive. In the dead of night, when the city believed it might finally exhale, federal boots thundered into the streets. This was no ordinary raid. This was the culmination, the final, all-in gambit, of a federal operation months in the making. Neighbors, who hadn't dared peek outside for weeks, felt the tremor of hundreds of arrests at once. Behind barred doors and across barricaded homes, cartel lieutenants fell, one by one. And then, the moment that would echo forever, the capture of the man who had lit the fuse. For the first time in this bloody siege, the city dared whisper, was this the end? But the numbers told the deeper story. By dawn's first light, Tijuana stood battered but still upright. The siege was declared over. But as the sky lightened, the scars remained. Not just on concrete, but in memory. Families counted their dead. Businesses, already trembling, counted their losses. And the silence felt endless. This was a city still standing. But it was not the same city anymore. In some neighborhoods, murals sprang up, names, faces, dates, memorials to lives snuffed out. In others, graffiti marked old cartel routes or claimed territory anew. But perhaps the most chilling traces were the empty chairs. Tables set for dinner that would never happen. Even as the federal forces departed, the question lingered, is peace truly won, if fear remains? Tijuana had survived its darkest chapter. Yet around every corner, the echoes of gunfire still drifted through alleys. And even now, in the quiet aftermath, one must wonder, what monster slumbers next? Morning in Tijuana now feels different. The sun still rises over the hills, but the shadows linger, as if the city knows the night's silence could be broken at any moment. Walls tell stories here. Some of hope. Some of warning. A dove painted in bright colors, wings torn, reminds everyone that peace is still fragile. Children walk to school past murals they don't always understand, and graffiti they understand all too well. Life goes on. The laughter at taco stands, the music from open doorways, all under the watchful eyes of armed patrols. Artists reclaim old battlefields, one brushstroke at a time. But turn down the wrong street, and you'll find reminders that the fight never left. The border still stands, a line of steel and shadow, dividing two worlds, yet connecting them in ways most don't see. Beneath the streets, the arteries of the old war still pulse. Sophisticated tunnels, wired, vented, running under the border like veins. Every so often, the government makes a move, raids that snatch headlines, but rarely stop the blood from seeping back in. The city glows at night. Neon signs. Music. And, sometimes, the distant crack of gunfire. Funerals here are quiet, almost routine. The city has learned to grieve without drawing too much attention. Fear doesn't leave easily. Parents grip their children's hands tighter, scanning streets they once strolled without a second thought. Cartel graffiti shifts like the tides, one name painted over another, a silent declaration of who holds this block, for now. Progress is real. New buildings rise. Businesses return. But the scars are never far from view. And in the quiet, you realize the truth. The siege ended. The war never did. And so, another chapter in the shadowy world of cartels closes. A tale of power, betrayal, and the cost of loyalty, paid in full. But in the cartel underworld, there's always another storm on the horizon. Because for every empire that falls, another is already rising. If you want more real stories that dig deep into the truth, like, comment, and subscribe for more intriguing stories like this.